Well, welcome to the Speak with People podcast. My name is Jason Raitz. I'm so excited that you are joining us today. This podcast exists because we know that our words matter, and healthy communication is oxygen to our relationships and our leadership. So whether you communicate one-on-one, on a team, from a stage, or like I am right now, from behind a camera or a microphone, we really believe that when you take up the challenge to be a healthy communicator, your world will change. So today we're so excited for our guest to be joining us. 2023 has already been such a great year for our podcast, and we're just amazed at the unbelievable quality and leadership just of our guests so far. And so we are so excited to have an incredible leader and communicator today. Just to give you a little bit about him before he hops in, he's an incredible leader, business owner, entrepreneur, church planner, pastor, husband, dad, has just done so much. I met him last fall as we were getting our speakers conference ready, and we're really honored that he's a part of that conference to be a speaker as well. So just want to go ahead and welcome Jason Burns to the podcast. Jason, thanks so much for being a part today.
Oh, so excited to be here. Thank you for that kind introduction. I will make sure to send this to my mom.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll have our producer cut a little segment and you can just text it to her.
Absolutely. Look what you did.
Well, hey, before we jump into some of the content, could you just give us, in your words, a little background into your story, who you are, where you come from, what you do, all that kind of stuff?
Sure. Well, my wife and I live in Lakeland, Florida, which is right between Orlando and Tampa. 3 amazing kids. One of the great joys of my life is being a dad. I just love my kids so much. We pastor an incredible church in Lakeland called Access Church. Started in my living room 15 years ago, and it's grown to a few thousand people that call it their church, which is so fun. In the middle of all of that, also started a company that helps churches called Radiant Printing, and we serve several thousand churches across the country every year. Have an amazing team there. And then in my spare time, I'm a huge Dallas Cowboys fan. I'm a steak connoisseur. That's about it. That's me.
Wow. So Monday night, kind of a big night then.
Monday's a huge night, and it's particularly big, not just because Cowboys Bucks, and I'm a Cowboys fan.
Yep.
It's particularly big because every Sunday when I close out my services, I pray, and then at the end I throw in a fun little, and God help the Cowboys win tonight kind of a thing. And the problem is that works most Sundays,
right?
Unless I'm playing the Bucks, and so I could have a full-blown mutiny on my hand.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It could be interesting. It could be interesting what happens. Who knows? Tom Brady may pull it out. A little bit more magic, but who knows?
That's the only reason I'm worried. I don't know what it is about him, but he just has our number.
It seems like he has a few teams' numbers.
I don't know. I can't figure it out, but we'll see.
Well, you have started and led multiple organizations, like you talked about, Radiant and Access. Take us back. Like, what was it like starting 2 organizations from scratch? I'm a former church planner, got it off the ground. Now I've started, a little small business called Speak with People, but I'm just always fascinated with people who think of starting something and then they stick with it. And you have led them for, many years now. So I'm just curious, what was it like? Were you ever close to giving up? Boy, I'd just love to go back into that journey a little bit.
Yeah. So I think you need to know why you start anything you do. Otherwise, you will give up.
Oof.
And so our story is actually rooted in some pain and some tragedy. So in 2000, I got married in 2004, and it was in the middle of a master's degree program. And as I was going through it, I had this sense that I was going to go be a pastor somewhere. So my heart was go be a youth pastor or a young adult pastor somewhere and climb the corporate ladder and eventually lead my own church someday. In the middle of all that, I was finishing my master's, got married, and 6 months into marriage, my wife got diagnosed with stage 2 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Oh.
And so our whole world came to a screeching halt, and all the interviews stopped, and we slowed down. And in the middle of that season, we felt like our hearts towards the city of Lakeland really changed. And we said, we need to do something here for our friends. Now, I think sometimes with dreamers, they never take the first step. And so they have a big dream, but they never take the first step. And we didn't know what it looked like. We just knew that we wanted to be obedient. And so we started a college Bible study for our friends. And March 17th, 2007, 15 friends showed up in my living room. And it is amazing to see what's happened with it. Now, you asked the question, though, did you ever feel like giving up? So 3 or 4 weeks we met in my living room, but it quickly outgrew my living room. We moved to a community center, and our very first night there, I had a Nissan Xterra that pulled a rickety old trailer that I bought on Craigslist. And when I say I bought it on Craigslist, when I got there, I found out that the reason it was so cheap is because it wasn't legally roadworthy, and the guy had made it himself. And the
Oh,
trailer empty by itself made my car drive at like a 40-degree angle. It felt like it was just so heavy. And so I'm already frustrated. It's our first night of having services where we are actually going to set up stuff. And so we have this service, 50 or 60 people showed up. I was pretty excited, but then comes the work afterwards. After you get the release of all that excitement and energy, then you still got to do the work. And so after the service was over, I walked out to my car. I pushed the button on my key fob, and it looked to me like it had rained or something, because it looked like there were dots of rain all over the glass. When I came around the side, I found out that someone had smashed in my windows while we were
uh,
like trying to serve God. In the middle of the service, someone smashed in my windows and stole all kinds of stuff out of my car. And I had this moment of walking outside by myself. If you've ever read the Bible, like the book of Psalms, for example, I love how honest David is. He has these yelling matches at God. And I just said, God, you can have this. Like, I'm just done. I
yep.
really am. But then we kept showing up. And I really think that there's power in what Eugene Peterson called long obedience in the same direction.
Mm,
Keep showing up, keep doing the same thing. Like Mark Batterson says, start small, think big, and dream long. Like, just have this idea. Like, it takes a long time. So just work at it, but it's going to start small.
yeah.
You're going to dream big, but then think long term. Don't just worry about right now, but that's what keeps you going for the long run.
Boy, that's so good. I love that quote. And as you got to the place where you were getting these things going, part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation, I mean, we could have went like many different angles because I just love your experience and where you're coming from, but I also love just how you communicate what you're for. And it's so clear. It's so succinct. And so, as you were launching your organization, the church and then the business, like, how did you get to the place where you figured that out? What were you going to be about? I loved how you said, start with your why, but then, how did you get to the place where you're like, okay, this is what we're going to be for, so we can kind of have an idea of how we're going to communicate that later?
Yeah, you've got to determine your values early on.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people dream up what they're going to do before they figure out who they're going to be. And that's a big deal. So I told you the story of the church. So my wife gets cancer. I was out in the middle of a speaking season where I was speaking at camps all over the country. The day before she was to start her first round of chemo, I flew in early. We had, I got home and she was sitting on the couch trembling in fear. They put one of those pick lines in her arm and she wouldn't even move her arm because it just felt so unnatural.
Uh,
We were scared. We were 23-year-olds, 6 months
oh,
newlyweds.
wow.
And I held her and we prayed. And I just said this. I said, God, never let me forget how I feel right now.
Mm,
So someday we have a lot of people coming. May I never forget how I feel right now. And so I think when you remember your why, it's that people are hurting, people are in need, people are walking through things. I got an email right before we started recording this that a member of our church just passed away from
mm,
cancer. And that's tragic. But
yep.
it's even more tragic for the family that's left behind. And so, it's those memories. It's like, yes, we've grown and yes, we have some success now, but you have to understand why your company exists in the first place.
Wow. Boy, that's so good. For you in those early days, was it a lot of what was in your heart? Did you have a team? Was it like a team process? Kind of walk us through that.
Well, in the early days of the church, we were just grateful for anyone who had a pulse and showed up,
Yes.
that you planted a church. We did everything wrong. I had a expert leader tell me one time that less than 3% of churches that start the way we did actually make it. And so I
Wow.
do think there's an element of tenacity with it, but we had nobody. We had no money. We just had a picture in our heart from God of what it could be. And it's really fueled by a conviction of what should be. We have all these friends who say they love God but have no connection to church whatsoever. Something needs to be done about that.
Wow. Wow. That's so good. What do you think stops people from, I mean, I know so many people personally, and there have been seasons in my life where I'm like, okay, I've got to do something about this problem. I've got to do something about this, but I didn't take the step, or I know people who didn't take the step. What do you think are some of the big things that just stop people from taking the step to pursue that or to live out that vision.
Yeah, it's perfect timing for me. I literally on last Sunday started a message series at my church called Dream Year. And I said most people live between two fears. They live between the fear of failure and the fear of insignificance. Fear of failure asks the question, what will happen if I try? And we play out every worst case scenario, what it's going to cost me, my
Yep.
reputation, my money, my comfort. Mark Twain said, and I paraphrase, something like, I've lived through many worst case scenarios, some of which actually happened. Like most of us, we imagine the worst case scenarios. And when you do that, you pay for it twice. The truth is, if you try something and fail, what it will actually cost you is so far less significant than what you think it will be. Maybe a little bit of a cutback of a season. It may be you go from a 2-car household to a 1-car household for a season.
Yep.
But I would rather give my life to doing something that matters and try than to not try. I read a book some years ago called Die Empty. And in the book, the author said he was at a conference in South Africa and the speaker asked the question. He said, what is the most expensive piece of property in the world? And you might think Hawaii, where there's scarce property, or Manhattan. But he said it's actually every cemetery you pass, because 6 feet under the ground lie the dreams of every book that was never written, every song that was never sung, every business that was never started.
Yep.
So there's the fear of failure. On the other extreme is the fear of insignificance. And the fear of insignificance asks, what will happen if I don't try?
Right.
And if you want your life to matter, if you want to make a difference, if I like to say it like this, if you want to go to bed every night feeling like that's how you live a life and that's how you live a day,
Yep.
you have to discover why you were made. And then you have to have the courage to take a step of faith and try.
Wow. Boy, I excuse me. I love that. I just that image that you just painted for us, to lay down at night and go, okay, that's how you live a day. Like I resonate with that. And that is quite an incredible picture and just that'd be a great story to tell. I love that. So let's switch over for a second. So where a part of the journey, did you start the church first or did you start the business first?
There's not a clear-cut answer to that, because I started the church in 2007, but I started the journey towards Radiant Printing as a graphic designer when I was probably 16 or 17 and had a primitive version of Adobe Photoshop and just tinkered with it until I got good at it.
Wow.
One of the things sometimes people ask is like, how do you know what you should do with your life? And it's like, follow your curiosity. And I was so curious about graphic design, and I always felt like I had an eye for like what fonts and colors and pictures went together. And I was always good at it. Well, then the reason for Radiant Printing is it took something that was my curiosity, good design, and a heart for excellence, and it married it with my love for the local church.
Wow.
And so Radiant Printing is a full service printing and design agency that really, and we can work with anybody, but our specialty is churches. And what I believe helped cause it to catch traction and go so quickly is, it was an area that I had some expertise. I'd spent so many years designing in the print field.
Yep.
And then secondly, it married itself with an area of my own giftedness and connectedness, which is the local church.
Wow. Wow. I love that. Do you attribute those for, why you've been able to be open all of these years? I mean, there are so many, small businesses that start, so many don't make it past year 3, year 5. I mean, here you are, employees, a team later, you've served all these thousands of churches. Do you attribute it to those? Is that why it's kind of fueled it? Are there some other, I know we have other, business owners, small business owners, people dreaming about owning a small business someday. Are there any, tips that you can give us that you've learned along the way that have helped you with this longevity, of helping so many people with your business?
It's a great question. I think one of my personal values is I want to help my friends win. And when you take that principle, it applies to every part of your life. But when I applied it to Radiant Printing, what it was, churches have the greatest mission on earth, in my humble opinion.
Yep.
And because of that, the excellence level should be unparalleled. And so because of that, like I took the values that I have of helping my friends win, and then I paired it with an experience factor that I was able to bring to the table. And then I also think that part of what helped it to succeed early on was the credibility that I brought. So
Mm.
even in the early days, before our church even had a couple hundred people, I could say to every pastor who called me, look, I pastor a church that doesn't own a building. All of our stuff goes in the back of a big box truck every single week, and we set it up and tear it down, and it looks good every single week. So I feel like I had excellence, I had credibility and trust factored in. I had a camaraderie. Like I'm in the game with you too. I'm a pastor as well. And so all those things together, I think, are what helped me get going well. What I think has sustained Radiant Printing and why it hasn't imploded like a lot of other organizations is we fight hard for culture.
Mm.
Like culture is everything. And the culture of our organization at Radiant Printing, really the culture of our church first is like we're going to take care of our team first. That's important because if the team is healthy, if the team is happy, if the team is loving what they do,
Yep.
excellence will be the outflow. So that's number one. Number two is we really do want to help our churches and our customers win.
Yep.
Like if they have the greatest mission on earth, then let's make it as easy as possible. And
Yep.
so incredible people, I only hire incredible people. I,
Mm.
I like to joke that I'm not the best leader. I'd like to joke that I'm not the smartest person in every room that I enter, but the one thing I've done really well is I've assembled a really, really good team. And I've leveraged my life open handedly to try to honor them as best I can. And then the results speak for themselves.
Oh, I love that. I love that. The culture piece is so incredibly huge. I remember years ago, I never finished, but I was working on an MBA. So I'm an MBA dropout, and we had a whole class on leadership. And our textbook that semester was Primal Leadership by Daniel Goleman, and he just goes into all this research about for years the American workforce, bosses and companies led out of fear and control and abuse and authoritative way, and productivity was actually way down. People were always afraid, but if you tapped into people's positive emotions and you created a culture where they actually wanted to be, everything went through the roof. And when we put our emphasis into that culture, I mean, you're so right. I mean, and inspiring. Everything changes with that. It's just incredible.
Yeah. So I didn't always get it right though. Like I like to tell the
Yeah.
story. Some years ago, there was a day when I drove to the church office, got there early. I got to the parking lot and there was already a few employees' cars there. And when I got there, I saw their cars and I'll just be honest, my heart sank
Mm.
and I didn't really want to go in. And it's not that they're bad people. They're wonderful people. It's just the culture wasn't right. It was
Right.
kind of toxic, kind of backstabbing. And so we worked really, really hard to fix it. And now I love the people I work with.
Mm.
Some people say that, we're a family. I don't love that analogy. I have a friend who says that he leads like a professional sports team, which is, I don't care what you did for me yesterday, it's tomorrow that counts. And if you can't cut it today or tomorrow, you're cut. And I don't like that either, but I think in the middle is something beautiful, which is we are a family on mission. We are a
Yep.
family that's professional. We hold ourselves to a higher standard because we love each other.
Yep. Yep. Boy, that's good. Okay, changing gears just for a second. So, we've talked about the organizations. Let's talk about, kind of us individually. Each of us has this own responsibility to communicate our story, to communicate our purpose, and kind of put it in marketing words, our brand. But each of us have been, gifted and created with different passions, gifts. Some call it our niche. Some call it our passion in life. Some call it, what's your brand? Can you give us any insight or walk us through any leadership on how we can figure out, okay, like, really? I have something to offer? No, that person does. That person does. They have more Instagram followers or whatever. Any insight you can just kind of give us to go, no, this is how you can start to figure out your personal purpose and insight. And, I use the word brand, but, it's really our purpose.
Yeah, well, let me jump off that word brand because I love that.
Yeah.
So, branding is a funny word, especially in design. So, if you do graphic design work, people will come to you for like a branding project. And a lot of times, what they're asking for is design me a logo. And I get that, but a logo isn't a brand. A
Mm.
brand is what people think about when they think about you,
Wow.
or a brand is what people think about when they think about your company. So, when you think about Nike, the brand isn't the swoosh. The brand for Nike is the feeling you get when you lace up a new pair of Jordans. It's the I want to be like Mike commercials from when we were kids. Like branding is what people think about when they think about you. So like my church has a logo and it's a good logo. It's the icon is on stickers on thousands of cars around our city. But my hope is that when people think about Access Church, they don't think about the blue arrow that is our logo. My hope is they think that, man, that's that church that paid off $1.5 million of deferred medical debt for people in our community. That's the
Wow.
generous church. That's the church that's making a difference. That's the
Yep.
church that's meeting needs. Like that, there's something I hope people feel when they
Yep.
think about it. And I have this belief that most people aren't intuitively thinkers first, we're feelers first.
Uh,
So I said that to say, how do people feel when they think of you? That's
yep.
the most important question you can ask if you want to build a personal brand. And the reason I say that is if you're not already naturally creating the feelings you want from people, you have to start there. The next
Wow.
question is, then what are your values? Because you should always work backwards from your values. So, my wife just got back from attending her grandmother's funeral a couple weeks ago, and her
Mm,
grandmother was this larger than life, wonderful person, big personality.
mm,
And as I was watching the funeral online, I thought to myself, I wish everybody could get a funeral before they die.
mm.
And the reason is, I wish you could know all the things people think about you and the ways
Yes.
people love you. And if you think with the end in mind and you work backwards, what are the things you want to be known for? So in my family, we literally we codified this. We have a personal what is it called? Like an emblem drawn for our family, like a coat of arms for our family. And the
Wow.
Burns family, if you're going to be a part of the Burns family, we're going to be we're going to be people of honor, we're going to be people of love, and we're going to
Mm.
be irrationally generous. These are our three things. And so my hope is that if you get to know me, you're going to be like, man, that guy is honoring not just of me, but of everyone. That love just flows freely from him. And then I want to live open-handedly. I want to be the most generous people that I know. So now when you know that, then you work backwards. And what I found is a lot of people spend so much time focused on, well, what do I do? What do I do with my life? Instead of figuring out who do I want to become? From a Christian standpoint, from a pastor standpoint, I think that when you figure out that, and then when you pair it with this idea that uniquely woven into the tapestry of how God made you are giftings and talents and abilities. And when those giftings and talents pair with your curiosities and then your personal values,
Yes.
what you want to do with your life will find you.
Mm.
It's so easy. So like in my life, I love the Lord with all of my heart. I really do. I have a desire to help people grow, to take a next step closer to God. And then because of that, like I'm always going to put people first. So if you come to my church, what you're going to find is an incredibly welcoming, unbelievably irrationally generous group of people
Mm.
who are all in process trying to grow together. Like it flows from how God wired me. It flows from my giftings and it flows from my curiosity.
Boy, that's good. Boy, that's good. Yeah, I was listening to Rory Vaden the other day. He's a motivational speaker, does a lot of coaching, but now he has a business where he just helps individuals figure out their brand. And it's just fascinating as I listened to that podcast and then now I'm listening to you, talk about that. How many people would be able to take such amazing steps forward in their own life if they realized that they did have that kind of purpose, they did have their own brand, and then they ran towards that. You talked about the funeral idea. Was reading Donald Miller's book Hero on a Mission, and he has a daily plan where he wrote his eulogy because he's like I want to write out the type of thing that I want people to I want to live that kind of life for people. I've officiated so many funerals, and the one that sticks out is the moment where I walked up to these two teenage boys. They were probably 17 and 18, and I said, "Okay, your mom would like you both to speak, about your dad." And they both looked at me and said, "We have absolutely nothing good to say about him. We will not do that." And I
Mm,
thought, "Oh my goodness, I don't want to ever be well. When I die, I won't be in that position, but I don't want to ever put my kids in that position. So
mm,
one of my personal, values is that I want to be close to my kids. I want to help them in every way. So, I mean, it's just so incredibly powerful. What advice would you give people who want to communicate their brand, communicate their purpose? Once they figure it out, are there things that we can do with our life to communicate it and, kind of share it with the world?
Yeah, I think the greatest piece of advice I'd give you is once you figure out what your life is going to be about, spend all of your time communicating what you're for.
Oh,
So many businesses, companies, individuals, they're railing against what they're against
yes.
instead of standing up for what they're for. And so the best advice I could give you is like, if you listen to me talk about my church, I'm never going to compare it to a church down the street. No, no. We're irrationally generous. We are the most kind, loving, gracious people. Like all of my language talks about what we're about, not the stuff that we're against. And sure, I could stand on a street corner with a sign holding up the list of sins that personally offend me, or but
Yep.
like that never changes the heart of anyone. The world's full of cynics, critics, and haters. The world needs more people who are alive, living out the giftings and talents that God's given to them.
Wow. Wow. I absolutely love that. Kind of shifting, corners a little bit again. We have, people listening to this on all different kind of places in their leadership. What's some advice you would give a younger leader, or maybe not a younger leader, just someone new to start, starting something? Either they want to plant a church, or they want to start a business, or they want to start a nonprofit. Is there any tips you would give them, to think about before they kind of walk through that process?
Yeah. Well, the first one is it takes an irrational amount of courage to pursue the dreams in your heart. And one of the things I love about the Bible, sometimes I think we read things kind of with a cursory view. The Bible's incredibly honest. Like all throughout scripture, I heard someone say that the phrase fear not is found 365 times in the Bible. It's like
Hmm.
God knew that you would need it once every single day. Fear
Wow.
is the constant companion of every dreamer. And the secret is you have to do it scared.
Yeah.
You just have to take a step of faith, and you have to trust, and you have to go for it. That's number one. The second thing I think is so important for so many dreamers, and the reason I think that the thing I think they should work on is not just don't just do it scared, but like give yourself permission to start small. Like it doesn't have to be a grand slam right away. Like the dream in your heart is like driving towards a mountain. When you're 100 miles away, it looks tiny. The closer you get, the more you see it with clarity, the more you
Hmm.
see it with confidence. And so, yeah, so just take a step. Just try it. Like failure is the best lesson you can learn. So what's the harm in trying?
Wow. That's so good. Are there any habits that you kind of employ in your daily life? Vanessa Van Edwards, who's written a couple of great books, Q's being one of them, just about her company, The Science of People. But she talks about how we have like these gremlins. Probably a person of faith would say, well, it's the enemy lying to us.
Yeah.
But these gremlins or the enemy's voice, who are just trying, who's planting all that fear in our lives. Do you have any daily habits that you employ that you think maybe help suppress some of those voices, those negative voices, those gremlins, all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So I'll give you a spiritual answer, and then I'll give you a practical answer. A spiritual answer is I have to know where my confidence comes from.
Yeah.
Like it's not self-confidence. Self-confidence is a myth. I actually have an idea for a book called Holy Confidence,
Mm.
because I do think that we're not called to be cocky, but we are called to walk in faith or confidence. But the reason it's holy confidence is the confidence doesn't come from me. The confidence comes from that's one. But
Yep.
number two, I kind of think that a lot of people make excuses and they'll blame it on, well, I'm an introvert. Well, I'm this. I'm not extroverted. I'm not courageous. I'm not. Well, if you have kids and your kids were kidnapped, what would you do?
Mm.
You wouldn't make excuses. You'd make progress. You
Yep.
would do whatever it takes. Like you wouldn't say, well, you got them. I'm an introvert. It is what it is. You would do whatever it takes. And so I think when we remember our why, I think like as a pastor, there are days that I have to come back to that prayer I told you about on the couch.
Yep.
I think that there are times when I can get myself so busy doing stuff instead of remembering why does this even exist?
Yeah.
That's that. And then on a practical habit, I think that you've got to figure out when are you at your best. So
Mm.
for whatever reason, doubt creeps into me at night, but in the morning, I have unbelievable quiet, I have unbelievable clarity, and for whatever reason, the way I'm wired, if I get up about 4:30, I can get 2.5 to 3 hours work done before my kids even get out of bed, and I can get more done in confidence, not in doubt,
Wow.
in quiet before my kids even wake up. Sometimes
Love
it's
that.
more than I accomplish for the rest of the day.
Right. Wow. Boy, that's so good. Isn't that amazing? I mean, when you find that sweet spot, and then you're able to just tap into that. It's something else. I remember years ago when I planted my church, and my staff would make fun of me because I'd go to bed by 8:30 or whatever because I, like you, am an early riser, and they'd make fun of me, and I was like, hey, just so you remember, like, I've been up since 4:30 and already worked, like
Mhm.
those 3.5 extra hours that you were still sleeping.
Well, the secret sauce there is you've got to figure out when you're at your best.
Yeah,
So when I was starting Radiant Printing, I would real deal work until the wee hours of the night, but I could do that kind of work at 11, 12, 1, 2,
yeah,
3, 4, right? But when I did my doctoral program a few years ago, I would try to stay up late and I would stare at a cursor blinking at me and I couldn't write a single word.
mm,
But if I got up at 4:30, I could write 10 to 15 pages before my kids even got out of bed.
wow,
So figure out when you're at your best and guard that because again, surely doubt will creep in if you're trying to do your best work at your worst possible moments of energy. So
right,
guard your heart, guard your time.
wow. How important is it to surround yourself with people who believe in you, encourage you, but will then, also speak the truth. I mean, I feel like we live in this world where, it's well documented, but we're always looking at someone else's highlight reel. I
Mhm.
just think about, can the game changer be, those closest people? Wondered, how they are in your life.
Well, I start with this idea that you can only be loved to the extent you're known. And so I think you have to ask the question, who knows you? Like, who really knows you? So that person you're comparing yourself with on Instagram, they don't know you. They don't know your struggles.
Yep.
And the truth is, conversely, you don't know them. You know the manicured, edited version of them that they want you to see.
Yep.
So I think we become like the 4 or 5 people we surround ourselves with the most. And so I think you should be intentional about friends. In
Yep.
the last 5 years or so, I've gotten intentional, not just about friends. I mean, I'm blessed. I work with my best friends. That doesn't work for everybody. It works really well for me. But more than that, in the last 5 years, I've really sought out mentors as well,
Mm.
and I bring ideas to them before. I bring thoughts after a decision was made or after an event was held, and I just ask, help me get better.
Yeah.
And there is something so freeing in that, like we're not perfect. We are in progress and process. So let's surround ourselves with people who only push us forward.
Wow. It's so good. That's so good. Well, one of the things that I'm just so honored, that you agreed that you would be a part of the speakers conference in March. And so, our our new company, we're hosting this event where, really for people who daily are presenting something, they're standing from stages, they're influencing people from behind a camera. Like, we have to continue growing in our craft. Many of us who have a gift of communicating, it will only take us so far. But then, I mean, even like you were talking about with the mentors, like, we need people who can speak into our lives to help us level up to go to that next level. So we're just so honored that you're joining us in March. For If you could just kind of speak to maybe the listener or the person who's been, kind of thinking about it. Do I really need to make this kind of trip or investment or, that kind of time to invest in my communication? I'd love any of your thoughts on that, to the person who's thinking about those kind of things.
I've heard multiple leaders say that as the leader gets better, everything gets better.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we have to decide if you're going to lead anything is I'm a constant student. I plan to give the rest of my life serving at my church. And a few years ago, I went back and got my doctoral degree just because I wanted to stretch myself. I
Wow.
wanted what I call the gift of disorientation. I wanted my brain to hurt a little bit. We need that. And when you're a communicator, you communicate one-on-one with people, but you also have the ability, and no matter how you communicate, to communicate to masses of people, your life gets multiplied. And I want a better and better version of my voice to be multiplied over and over and over through whatever channels of influence that I have.
Mm.
And so that's the bottom line. And so again, whatever you do in life, if you're a politician, a pastor, a leader, a preacher, whatever you are, you have influence. And so
Mm.
stewarding that influence is a big deal. And so I think conferences like yours I'm excited. I'm excited to speak, but I'm honestly more excited to learn because as we learn, as we get better, everything in our churches, everything in our businesses, everything in our corporations gets better.
That's right. That's so good. Well, hey, before we let you go, I thought we'd just ask you a couple rapid fire questions. People
Ooh,
can kind of keep getting to know you.
fun.
So I'll just hit you with a couple. First one, what's the best vacation location? Best vacation location. That's a lot to say. That you've ever been to.
Okay, so I have to delineate. There's three kinds of things. There's trips, there's vacations, and then there's adventure. A trip is when you take your kids,
Right.
and so the trip was Hawaii. We went this summer with my kids. That was amazing.
Wow.
Vacation, my wife and I went to Europe. We spent a week in Italy and in Spain. That's a
Oh,
vacation, no kids. And then adventure for my 40th birthday, my wife sent me to Iceland with one of my best friends, and we spent a week there climbing glaciers and walking through volcanoes and standing on black sand beaches. And it was amazing.
wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. Second question. If you had to eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Rest of my life. um, uh, Man, a New York strip, medium rare, loaded baked potato, and instead of a vegetable, give me a slice of pizza, and then banana pudding for desserts.
Ah, sounds delightful. Last question. Last year was one of the books that kind of the books that you read that kind of stuck out among the most, kind of made you think a ton.
Okay, do you want an honest answer or do you want a good answer for your podcast?
No, hit us with the honest answer.
Our
I'd love it.
honest answer is after doing my doctoral program where I'd read a stack of books that was like 3 feet high, I struggle to read for fun. I struggle to read
Yep.
for fun. And so what I've started doing is I've started reading more the doctoral way, which is to read through a book quickly to get the information out of it that you can.
Yep.
And the two authors that I get the most out of reading that way are Patrick Lencioni. I love his writing. It is
Yes.
so formative. And then Simon Sinek. I
Oh
love
yeah.
him. And then anything by Malcolm Gladwell.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Oh,
Awesome.
I'm sorry. I'm a pastor. The Bible.
Got to throw that in there. I love it.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it. Well, hey, could you tell our listeners, is there a place to find you online, or where would you like to direct people to?
Yeah, you can find me on social media. On everything. My name is at I am Jason Burns. I am Jason
I
Burns.
love that. I love that. Well, Jason, thank you so much. This was such a rich conversation, and so appreciate your heart and just how you communicate. I've watched many of your sermons from church, and just appreciate how you communicate, your passion to the world through social media. And so thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
What an honor, man. I love what you're doing. Excited to be a part of this first conference and believe the best is still coming for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, hey, podcast listeners, before you close up and head to the next one, just want to remind you, go to thespeakersconference.com, thespeakersconference.com. You can get all the information for our 2.5 days in Clearwater Beach, March 21 to 23. Join Dr. Jason Burns, Albert Tate, Mike Goodwin, April Diaz, myself, other communicators as we dive into how to become a more effective, empathetic, captivating communicator, inspire our audience to lean in. Again, we exist because words matter, and we really believe that healthy communication is oxygen for our relationships and leadership. So we really challenge you. We hope that this encouraged you to choose healthy communication in your daily life, because we really know your world will be better. Thanks again, and thanks for joining us next week.